So the version of the Mulamadhyamakakarika I'm going to read is by, Stephen Batchelor. And it says, the Mulamadhyamakakarika, Sanskrit, or Fundamental Verses of the Middle Way, is a foundational text of the Madhyamaka school of Mahayana philosophy, composed by Nagarjuna in approximately the second to third century CE. A collection of 27 chapters in Sanskrit verse, it is widely regarded as the most influential text of Buddhist philosophy, and had a major impact on the subsequent development of Buddhism. Sanskrit Mulamadhyamakakarika, Tibetan Bu Ma Ritsa Bai Tsheg Leur Biazpa Shezrab Ses Biaba by Nagarjuna. Romanization and literal English translation of the Tibetan text by Stephen Batchelor. Preface. This document contains the Romanized Tibetan text of Nagarjuna's Mulamadhyamakakarika, together with a literal English translation. 2 Tibetan texts were consulted. The versions found in 1. The Asian Classics Input Project, Woodblock to Laser Source CD, Release A, produced under the direction of Ken Rinpoche Geshe Lobsang Tharchin, Washington, D.C., 1993. And 2. Debuma Riggs Shog's Drug, the 6th Yut Shastra of Madhyamika, pages 1 through 37, edited by Professor L.P. Lalungpa, Delhi, 1970. The version here relies on both sources as well as the text embedded in the prose of Tsongkhapa's An Ocean of Reason, a great exposition of the root text verses from the center, Ritsa Shetik, Chen Riggs Pai, Ridya Mitcho, Varanasi, Matho Slab Dge Ladan, Spai Las King, 1973. Each Tibetan verse is followed by a literal English translation. This translation served as the first draft for the free poetic version published in Stephen Batchelor. In making the English translation, the primary authority was Tsongkhapa's 14th century commentary, An Ocean of Reason, a great exposition of the root text verses from the center. Any mistakes are my own. Stephen Batchelor, Sharpham College, April 2000. The title given in brackets below the title at the head of each chapter is the name of the poem found in Verses from the Center, a Buddhist vision of the sublime. Translator's homage. Herein lie the root verses of the center called intelligence. In the language of India, Prajna Nama Mulamadhyamakakarika. In the language of Tibet, Bu Ma Ritsa Bai Tsheg Leur Biazpa Shezrab Ses Biaba. I prostrate to the youthful Manjushri. Nagarjuna's homage. I bow down to the most sublime of speakers, the completely awakened one who taught contingency, no cessation, no birth, no annihilation, no permanence, no coming, no going, no difference, no identity. 2 ease fixations. 1. Investigation of conditions. Conditions. 1. No thing anywhere is ever born from itself, from something else, from both, or without a cause. 2. There are 4 conditions, causes, objects, immediate and dominant. There is no 5th. 3. The essence of things does not exist in conditions and so on. If an own thing does not exist, an other thing does not exist. 4. There is no activity which has conditions. There is no activity which does not have conditions. There are no conditions which do not have activity, and none which do have activity. 5. Since something is born in dependence upon them, then they are known as conditions. As long as it is not born, why are they not non-conditions? 6. It is impossible for something that either exists or not to have conditions. If it were non-existent, of what would they be the conditions? If it were existent, why would it need conditions? 7. When things cannot be established as either existent, non-existent, or both, how can one speak of an establishing cause? Such would be impossible. 8. An existent phenomenon is clearly said to have no object at all. If the phenomenon has no object, where can the object exist? 9. If phenomena are not born, it is invalid for there to be cessation. Therefore, an immediate condition is unreasonable. What, having ceased, can also be a condition? 10. Because the existence of essenceless things does not exist, it is incorrect to say, when this exists, that arises. 11. There is no effect at all in the conditions individually or together. How can that which is not in the conditions itself be born from conditions? 12. If, although the effect is not there, it is born from these conditions, why is an effect not born from what are not its conditions? 13. Effects are of the nature of conditions. Conditions do not have own nature. How can those effects of what does not have own nature be of the nature of conditions? 14. Therefore, it does not have the nature of conditions, nor is there an effect with the nature of non-conditions. 2. Investigation of coming and going, walking. 1. Then there is no going in what has gone. There is no going also in what has not yet gone. Motion is unknowable apart from what has gone and not yet gone. 2. Where there is moving, there is going. Furthermore, because moving is within motion, and is neither gone nor not yet gone, therefore there is going within motion. 3. How can going be possible within motion? Because motion that is not going is impossible. 4. For whomever there is going within motion, for him it will follow that there could be no going within motion, because there is going within motion. Or, following the structure and wording of verse 10, to claim that there is going within motion implies that there could be no going within motion, because it is asserted there is going within motion. 5. If there were going within motion, it would follow that going would be twofold: that by which one becomes someone in motion in a place, and that by which one goes in that place. 6. If going were twofold, the goer would also be twofold, because going is impossible without a goer. 7. If there were no goer, going would be impossible. If there were no going, where could a goer be existent? 8. When a goer does not go, a non-goer cannot go. What third one, other than a goer and a non-goer, could go? See verse 15. When a goer does not stay, a non-goer cannot stay. What third one, other than a goer and non-goer, could stay? 9. When a goer is impossible without going, then how is it possible to say a goer goes? 10. To claim that a goer goes implies that there could be a goer who does not go, because it is asserted that a goer goes. See verse 4. For whomever there is going within motion, for him it will follow that there could be no going within motion, because there is going within motion. 11. If the goer goes, it would follow that going would be twofold: that which reveals the goer and that which goes once he has become a goer. 12. If a beginning of going does not exist in what has gone, if a beginning of going does not exist also in what has not yet gone, and if there does not exist a beginning within motion, wherein is a beginning of going made? 13. Before a beginning of going, there is not any motion or anything which has gone wherein going could begin. How can going exist in what has not yet gone? 14. If a beginning of going is simply not apparent in any way, examine what has gone, what is motion, what has not yet gone. 15. When a goer does not stay, a non-goer cannot stay. What third one other than a goer and a non-goer could stay? See 8. 8. When a goer does not go, a non-goer cannot go. What third one other than a goer and a non-goer could go? 16. When a goer is not possible without going, how then is it possible to say a goer stays? 17. There is no reversal of motion, nor also of what has gone and what has not yet gone. Reversal of going, engagement to stay, and reversal of staying are similar to going. 18. It is inappropriate to say going and a goer are the same. It is inappropriate to say going and a goer are different. 19. If whatever is going were a goer, it would follow that the actor and the act would be the same too. 20. If going and a goer were conceived as different, there could be going without a goer and a goer without going. 21. If things are not established as the same and as different, how can they be established? 22. That very going by which a goer is made evident does not enable a goer to go, because there is no goer before going, who would be going where? 23. A going which is other than the going by which a goer is made evident does not enable a goer to go, because it is impossible for going to be twofold within a single goer. 24. One who is a goer does not go in the three aspects of going. Also, one who is not a goer does not go in the three aspects of going. 25. One who is and is not a goer also does not go in the three aspects of going. Therefore, going and a goer, and also that which is gone over, do not exist. 3. Investigation of the sense organs. Seeing. 1. Seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and touching, mind, are the 6 sense organs. Their experienced objects are what is seen and so forth. 2. Seeing does not see itself. How can what does not see itself see anything else? 3. The example of fire is not able to fully establish seeing. It, along with seeing, has been refuted by gone, not gone, and going. 4. When not seeing the slightest thing, there is no act of seeing. How can it then be reasonable to say, seeing sees? 5. Seeing does not see. Non-seeing does not see. It should be understood that seeing explains the seer too. 6. Without letting go of seeing, a seer does not exist. In letting go of seeing, there is also no seer. If there is no seer, where can there be what is seen and seeing? 7. Just as it is said that a child emerges in dependence on a father and a mother, Likewise, it is said that consciousness emerges independent upon an eye and a visual form. 8. Because there is no what is seen and no seeing, the four, such as consciousness, do not exist. How can clinging, etc., exist? 9. It should be understood that seeing explains hearing and smelling and tasting and touching, mind, hearer, what is heard, etc. 4. Investigation of the aggregates. Body. 1. Apart from the cause of form, form is not perceived. Apart from form, the cause of form also does not appear. TS 128 gives the eye, etc., as examples of form, and the four elements as examples of the causes of form. 2. If there were form apart from the cause of form, it would follow that form is without cause. There is no object at all that is without cause. 3. If a cause of form existed apart from form, it would exist as a cause without fruit. Causes without fruit do not exist. 4. If form existed, a cause of form would be untenable. If form did not exist, a cause of form would be untenable. 5. Forms which do not have a cause are not at all tenable. Therefore, do not conceive the concept of form at all. TS 129 through 30 explains Rung Min Nyid as being an added emphasis. To not conceive of the concept of form, he regards as unworthy for the yogin who beholds reality. He cites Buddhapalada, who explains how it is inappropriate in contrast to how appropriate it would be to reflect a non-abiding. 6. It is untenable to say the fruit is like the cause. It is also untenable to say the fruit is unlike the cause. 7. Feeling and perception, impulses and mind in all things are comparable in every aspect at every stage with form. 8. When having argued by means of emptiness, everything of that one who objects is not an objection. It is similar to what is to be established. 9. When having explained by means of emptiness, everything of that one who finds fault is not a fault. It is similar to what is to be established. 5. Investigation of the elements. Space. 1. Not the slightest bit of space exists prior to the characteristics of space. If space existed prior to its characteristics, it would follow that it would be without characteristics. 2. A thing without characteristics does not exist anywhere at all. If a thing without characteristics does not exist, to what do characteristics extend? 3. Characteristics do not extend to that which has no characteristics, nor to what possesses characteristics. They also cannot extend to something other than what either possesses or does not have characteristics. 4. If characteristics do not extend to something, something characterized would be impossible. If something characterized is impossible, characteristics too would not exist. 5. Therefore, something characterized does not exist, and characteristics do not exist. There also does not exist a thing which is apart from being something characterized or a characteristic. 6. If there is not a thing, of what can there be a non-thing? By whom are the opposites thing and non-thing known as a thing and non-thing? TS 140 understands a thing to refer to the obstructive matter of which space, as a negation and hence a non-thing, is a negation of. 7. Therefore, space is not a thing. It is not a non-thing. It is not something characterized, it is not a characteristic. The other 5 elements, too, are similar to space. 8. Those of small minds see things as existent and non-existent. They do not behold the utter pacification of what is seen. 6. Investigation of desire and the desirous one. Addiction. 1. If a desirous one without desire exists before desire, desire would exist dependent on that desirous one. When a desirous one exists, desire exists. 2. If there were no desirous one, how could there be desire? The same follows for the desirous one too. It depends on whether desire exists or not. 3. It is not reasonable for desire and the desirous one to arise as coexistent. In this way, desire and the desirous one would not be mutually contingent. 4. Identity has no coexistence. Something cannot be coexistent with itself. If there were difference, how could there be coexistence? 5. If the identical were coexistent, coexistence would also occur between the unrelated. If the different were coexistent, coexistent would also occur between the unrelated. Grogs med par is translated by K, G, and Noli as without association. The Tibetan literally means without assistance. Grogs pa is the defining characteristic of Rikyen, condition, i.e., it implies a functional relationship, usually causal. It is what helps something become what it is. 6. If the different were coexistent, how would desire and the desirous one be established as different? Or, if that were so, how would those two be coexistent? This verse seems to say no more than verse 7 below, but says it less neatly. 7. If desire and the desirous one were established as different, because of what could one understand them as coexistent? 8. If one asserts them to be coexistent because they are not established as different, then because they would be very much established as coexistent, would not one also have to assert them to be different? 9. Since different things are not established, coexistent things are not established. If there existed any different things, one could assert them as coexistent things. 10. In that way, desire and the desirous one are not established as coexistent or not coexistent. Like desire, all phenomena are not established as coexistent or not coexistent. TS 153 explains all phenomena to refer to hatred and the hater, stupidity and the confused one, and proceeds to reconstruct verse 1, substituting hatred for desire, etc. 7. Investigation of birth, abiding, and perishing. Sanskrit title is Investigation of the Compounded. 1. If birth were compounded, it would possess the 3 characteristics of a compound. If birth were uncompounded, how would it be a characteristic of a compound? 2. The 3, such as birth, cannot individually be that which characterizes compounds. How is it possible for one at one time to be compounded of all 3? 3. If birth, abiding, and perishing had an other characteristic of being compounded, this would be endless. If not, they would not be compounded. 4. The birth of birth gives birth to the root birth alone. The root birth also is that which gives birth to the birth of birth. 5. If your birth of birth gives birth to the root birth, how does that which is not yet born from your root give birth to that root birth? 6. if that which is born from your root birth gives birth to the root, how does that root which is born from that give birth to that from which it is born? 7. If that which has not been born is able to give birth to that of yours which is being born should be able to give birth to that. Verses 4 through 7. This is a clear example of another hand interfering with the text. Not only is it incapable of being reset as poetry, it is incompatible with the style of the verses that precede and especially those that follow. Also, see Mulamadhyamakakarika, chapter 1, verse 7 through 9. When things cannot be established as either existent, non-existent, or both, how can one speak of an establishing cause? Such would be impossible. An existent phenomenon is clearly said to have no object at all. If the phenomenon has no object, where can the object exist? 9. If phenomena are not born, it is invalid for there to be cessation. Therefore, an immediate condition is unreasonable. What, having ceased, can also be a condition. 8. Just as lamplight illuminates itself and others, likewise birth, too, gives birth to both itself and the thing of others. Itself and the thing of others is the clumsy Tibetan form of Sva Para Atma, or Svabhava Parabhava. 9. Wherever lamplight is present, there is no darkness. What does lamplight illuminate? It illuminates by dispelling darkness. 10. If, when lamplight is being generated, it does not encounter darkness, how does the generation of lamplight dispel darkness? 11. If darkness is dispelled even though it does not encounter lamplight, this lamplight dwelling here would eliminate the darkness that dwells in all the worlds. 12. If lamplight illuminated itself in the thing of others, darkness too would without doubt obscure itself and the thing of others. 13. How can unborn birth give birth to itself? If the born gives birth, when it has been born, what would be born? 14. The born and the unborn, the being born, do not in any way give birth. That has been explained by the gone, not gone, and going. 15. When being born does not arise in what is born, then how can one say it is being born in dependence on the born? 16. Whatever is dependently arising, that is by nature pacified. Therefore, being born and what is born too are pacified. TS 174 through 6 gives a good summary of the identity of dependent arising and emptiness with citations, including 174. Whoever sees dependent and relational arising sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. And 175. What is born from conditions is unborn. By its very nature it has no birth. What is dependent on conditions is said to be empty. He who knows emptiness is conscientious. Bad Yod. 17. If any unborn thing existed anywhere, on being born, that unborn thing would not exist. If so, what would be born? 18. If that which has been born gives birth to what is being born, what other thing that has been born would be giving birth to that which has been born? 19. If another thing that has been born gives birth to it, this would be endless. If it is born without another which has been born, or if it is born without being born, everything would be born like that, i.e., causelessly. 20. Thus it is not reasonable for what exists or does not exist to be born. It has been shown above that there is no existent or non-existent. 21. It is not tenable for a thing that is perishing to be born. It is not tenable for that which is not perishing to be a thing. 22. A thing that has remained does not remain. A thing that has not yet remained does not remain. That which is remaining also does not remain. What unborn thing can remain? 23. It is not possible for a thing that is perishing to remain. It is not possible for that which is not perishing to be a thing. 24. If all things at all times are aging and dying phenomena, what things are there which could remain without aging and dying? 25. It is not reasonable for what remains to remain due to something else that remains or due to itself. This is like how what has been born is not given birth to by itself or another. See 5:18 through 19. 18. If that which has been born gives birth to what is being born, what other things that has been born would be giving birth to that which has been born? 19. If another thing that has been born gives birth to it, this would be endless. If it is born without another which has been born, or if it is born without being born, everything would be born like that, causelessly. 26. What has ceased does not cease. What has not ceased also does not cease. Likewise, what is ceasing also does not. What unborn thing can cease? See 22. 22. A thing that has remained does not remain. A thing that has not yet remained does not remain. That which is remaining also does not remain. What unborn thing can remain? 27. It is not possible for a thing which has remained to cease. It is also not possible for a thing which has not remained to cease. Past tense. Has remained follows Sanskrit, K175, Tibet, and TS 183 could read, it is not possible for a thing which remains to cease. It is also not possible for a thing which does not remain to cease. 28. A particular state of something does not cause that particular state itself to cease. Moreover, another particular state does not cause that particular state to cease. TS 184 illustrates this with the example of milk and curds, butter, i.e. milk does not cause milk to cease, nor do curds cause milk to cease. 29. When the birth of all phenomena is not possible, then the cessation of all phenomena is not possible. 30. Cessation is not possible in an existent thing. Thingness and nothingness are not possible in one. 31. Cessation is not possible also in what is not a thing. This is similar to how there is no cutting off a second head, i.e. a person cannot be beheaded twice. 32. Cessation does not exist by its own self, nor does cessation exist by something else. This is like how what has been born is not given birth to by itself or another. See 25. 25. It is not reasonable for what remains to remain due to something else that remains or due to itself. This is like how what has been born is not given birth to what is itself or another. 33. Because birth and remaining and perishing are not established, there is no conditioned. Because the conditioned is utterly unestablished, how can the unconditioned be established? 34. Like a dream, like a magician's illusion, like a city of Gandharvas, likewise birth and likewise remaining, likewise perishing are taught. 8. Investigation of act and actor. Actors. 1. One who exists as an actor does not do that which exists as an act. One who does not exist as an actor also does not do that which does not exist as an act. 2. One who exists has no activity. Something would also exist as an act without an actor. One who exists has no activity. Something would also exist as an actor without an act. 3. If one who does not exist as an actor did that which does not exist as an act, the act would have no cause. The actor too would have no cause. 4. If there were no cause, effect and cause would not be evident. If they were non-existent, activity and agent and doing would not be evident. 5. If activity, etc., did not appear, dharma and adharma would not be evident. If dharma and adharma did not exist, there would be no fruit that comes from them. 6. If there were no fruit, the path of liberation and higher states would not be appropriate. Also, it would follow that all activities are meaningless. 7. One who exists and does not exist as an actor does not do what exists and does not exist as an act. Since existence and non-existence are mutually contradictory in one thing, where can they exist? 8. One who exists as an actor does not do an act which is non-existent. One who does not exist as an actor also does not do what exists as an act. Here, too, faults will follow for one. 9. One who exists as an actor does not do what does not exist as an act, and what neither exists or not as an act, because of what was demonstrated by the proof above. Verses 9 through 11 are suspect. This degree of systematic nitpicking, as well as the scholarly reference to the proof above, seem out of character. 10. One who does not exist as an actor does not do what exists as an act, and what neither exists or not as an act, because of what was demonstrated by the proof above. 11. One who neither exists nor does not exist as an actor does not do that which exists and does not exist as an act. Here too this is to be known through the proof demonstrated above. 12. An actor depends on acts, and acts too occur in dependence on an actor. Apart from this, one does not see a cause which is established. 13. Likewise, one should understand clinging, because act and actor are dispelled. Remaining things, too, should be understood by means of actor and act. 9. Investigation of the presence of something prior. Already. 1. Some say that whatever is involved in seeing, hearing, etc., and feeling, etc., exists prior to them. 2. If that thing is not evident, how can there be seeing, etc.? Therefore, the presence of that thing must exist before them. 3. What configures, makes known, that thing which is present before seeing and hearing, etc., and feeling, etc.? 4. If it were present even without seeing, etc., there would be no doubt that they would exist even without it. 5. It is illuminated by them, they are illuminated by it. How could it exist without them? How could they exist without it? 6. It is not evident prior to the totality of seeing, etc. From among seeing, etc., a different one illuminates it at different times. 7. If it is not evident prior to the totality of seeing, etc., how can it be evident prior to each of them seeing, etc., individually? 8. If the seer itself were the hearer and the feeler were it too, if it existed prior to each, In that way it would not make sense. 9. If the seer were different, the hearer different, the feeler different, at the time the seer exists, there would be a hearer. Many selves would come about. 10. Also, it is not evident in the elements from which seeing and hearing, etc., and feeling, etc., occur. 11. If that to which seeing and hearing, etc., and feeling, etc., belong is not evident, they too could not be evident. 12. Reject the concepts it exists, it doesn't exist, about that which is not evident prior to, now, or after seeing, etc. 10. Investigation of fire and firewood. Fire. 1. If firewood were fire, actor and act would be one. If fire were other than wood, it would occur even without wood. 2. Fire would burn permanently and would not arise from causes for burning. Starting a fire would be meaningless. If it were like that, there would also be no act. 3. Because fire does not depend on anything else, it would not arise from causes for burning. If it burned permanently, starting it would be meaningless. 4. Concerning this, if one thinks that while burning it is firewood, if it is such only at that time, by what could that firewood be ignited? 5. Because fire is other, it would not connect. If it did not connect, it would not ignite. If it did not ignite, it would not die. If it did not die, it would also remain in possession of its own characteristic. 6. Just as a woman connects with a man, and a man too with a woman, although fire is other than wood, it is fit to connect with wood. 7. If fire and wood eliminated each other, even though fire is something other than wood, it would have to connect with wood. 8. If fire were dependent on wood and wood were dependent on fire, of what becomes fire and wood dependently, which would be established first? 9. If fire were dependent on wood, already established fire would be established again. Firewood also would be such even without fire. 10. If a thing, A, is established dependently on B, but if what it depends upon, B, is established also in dependence on that very thing, A, what would be established in dependence on what? 11. How can a thing, A, which is established dependently on B, be dependent on B when it, A, is not established? If one asks, how can establishment be dependent, it is not reasonable for it, A, to be dependent. 12. There is no fire that is dependent on wood. There is also no fire that is not dependent on wood. There is no wood that is dependent on fire. There is also no wood that is not dependent on fire. 13. Fire does not come from something else. Fire also does not exist in wood. Likewise, the remainder of wood has been shown by gone, not gone, and going. 14. Wood itself is not fire. Fire is also not something other than wood. Fire does not possess wood. Wood does not exist in fire. That fire does not exist in it. 15. Through fire and wood is explained without exception all the stages of self, in the grasped and at the same time jugs, cloth, and so on. 16. I do not think those who teach the identity or difference of self and things are wise in the meaning of the teaching. 11. Investigation of extremes of before and after. Before. 1. When asked, is a before extreme evident? The great Muni said, it is not. Samsara has no beginning, no end. It has no before, no after. 2. For that without beginning and end, where can a middle be in that? Therefore, it is not possible for it to have before, after, and simultaneous phases. 3. If birth were before and aging, death after, there would be birth without aging and death, and also without dying, one would be born. 4. If birth were after and aging death before, how could there be an uncaused aging and death which has no birth? 5. It is not suitable for birth and aging death to be simultaneous. That which is being born would be dying, and both would be without cause. 6. Why fixate on that birth, that aging, dying, for which the phases of before, after, simultaneity are impossible? 7. It is not just samsara alone that has no before extreme, cause, and fruit themselves, and characteristics and the basis for characteristics themselves. 8. Feeling in the feeler, whatever is suitable to bear meaning. Also all things have no before extreme. 12. Investigation of anguish. Anguish. Tibetan has investigation of what is made by me and made by others, while Sanskrit has dukkha. 1. Some assert that anguish arises from being made by self, made by other, by both, without cause. To do that is not suitable. 2. If it were made by self, therefore it would not be contingently arising, because those aggregates arise contingently on these aggregates. A difficulty with this entire chapter is to know what badag or badag, self, refers to in the context of the creation of anguish. Does it refer to oneself, i.e. the person who suffers, or to anguish itself? In verse 2, the latter reading would seem to suggest itself, but then it would be at odds with the subsequent verses, where Nagarjuna explicitly introduces the ideas of svapudgala and parapudgala, one's own person and the other person, as the creators of anguish. Verse 10, with its comparison of anguish with external things, likewise would suggest the latter reading. I have chosen to translate the entire chapter, thus leaving verse 10 ambiguous in the former sense. The crucial issue here, I feel, is the confusion around what it means to say, I cause myself pain. 3. If that were other than this, and if this were other than that, anguish would be made by other, and that would be made by those others. TS 244 is happy with the reading of CD by Buddhapalita and Shereb Dronme. Gazan de Dagagis di Biaspas, Sedug Biznagal, Gazam Gayas Bias Par Gayur. Anguish would be made by others, since those others made this. 4. If anguish were made by one's own person, who would that person be who has made anguish by himself, but is not included in the anguish? 5. If anguish arose from another person, how could it be suitable for there to be someone not included in the anguish, who has been given it by another who made the anguish? 6. If anguish arose from another person, who would that other person be who, having made it, gives it to someone else, but is not included in the anguish? TS 246 points out that this verse is not found in Buddhapalada or Sherab Dronme, but is found in Chandrakirti. 7. Since it is not established as made by self, how can anguish have been made by other? For whatever anguish is made by other, that has been made by his self. 8. Anguish is not made by self. That is not made by that itself. If it is not made by an other self, how can anguish be made by other? 9. If it is made by each, anguish would be made by both. Not made by self, not made by other, how can anguish have no cause? 10. Not only does anguish alone not have the four aspects, external things too do not have the four aspects. 13. Investigation of samskaras. Change. 1. The Bhagavan said that whatever dharma is deceptive, that is false. All conditions are deceptive dharmas, thus they are false. The key to this verse lies in the source of the statement of the Buddha. Hopkins points out that a similar statement is found in the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutra of the Majjhima Nikaya. Majjhima Nikaya 140-26, page 1093. This passage is translated from the Pali as, "For that is false, bhikkhu, which has a deceptive nature, and that is true which has an undeceptive nature, nibbana. Therefore, a bhikkhu possessing this truth possesses the supreme foundation of truth. For this, bhikkhu, is the supreme noble truth, namely nibbana, which has an undeceptive nature." Tsongkhapa's outline treats this verse under the heading, explaining non-inherent existence by means of a citation well known to others. He then cites this text, which reads, "Bhikshus, whatever phenomenon is a deceptive conditioned thing, duspiyas, that is false, and whatever phenomenon, nirvana, is undeceptive, that is sublime truth." And then another, "Likewise, a conditioned thing is also a deceptive phenomenon. It is also an utterly perishing phenomenon." TS 250 through 251. 2. If whatever is a deceptive phenomenon is false, what is deceptive about it? In what way is it deceptive? That statement by the Bhagavan is a complete presentation of emptiness. 3. Things have no essential nature because they are seen to change into something else. Things do not lack an essential nature because things are emptiness. 4. If there were no essential nature, whose nature would it be to change into something else? If there were an essential nature, how would it be possible to change into something else? 5. This itself does not change into something else. The other itself, too, does not either, because youth does not age, because age, too, does not age. 6. If this itself changes into something else, milk itself would be curds. Something other than milk would be the being of curds. 7. If a bit of the non-empty existed, a bit of the empty would also exist. If there did not exist a bit of the non-empty, how could the empty exist? 8. The conquerors taught emptiness as the forsaking of all views. Those who view emptiness are taught to be without realization, incurable, incorrigible. The source here is given by Chandrakirti and Tsongkhapa as the Ratnakuta Sutra, i.e. a Mahayana text. The earliest Mahayana sutras now extant appear to be some of those collected in what came to be called the Ratnakuta. Some of these were translated into Chinese as early as the latter part of the 2nd century AD. Warder, Indian Buddhism, page 356. The Kasyapa Parivarta seems to be one of these early sections. In Warder, it is sometimes synonymous with the Ratnakuta. in contrast to the Great Ratnakuta. It also originates from Andhra in South India. Tsongkhapa quotes a large chunk of the Kasyapa Parivarta, Od Srungs Kayas Zuspa, page 260 through 261, which concludes with this passage. The Bhagavan said, likewise, Kasyapa, if emptiness is the emerging from forsaking all views, then Kasyapa, he who views emptiness alone, cannot possibly be cured. 14. Investigation of connections. Connection 1. The seen, the seeing, and the seer. These three do not mutually connect as pairs or all together. 2. Likewise, desire, desiring, and the desired. The remaining afflictions and also the remaining sense fields do not connect by three aspects. 3. If the other connects to the other, then because the seen and so forth do not exist as other, therefore there is no connection. 4. Not only are the seen and so forth alone not existing as other, it is invalid for anything simultaneous with something to be other than it. 5. The other is other, independence upon the other. Without the other would not be other. It is invalid for whatever is dependent on something to be other than that. 6. If the other was other than the other, then without the other it would be other. Without the other it would not be other. Therefore it does not exist. 7. Otherness does not exist in the other, nor does it exist in what is not other. If otherness does not exist, neither the other nor that itself exists. 8. That does not connect with that. The other, too, does not connect with the other. The connecting, the connection, and the connector, too, do not exist. 15. Investigation of essences. Essence. 1. It is unreasonable for an essence to arise from causes and conditions. Whatever essence arose from causes and conditions would be something that has been made. 2. How is it possible for there to be an essence which has been made? Essences are not contrived and not dependent on anything else. 3. If an essence does not exist, how can the thingness of the other exist? For the essence of the thingness of the other is said to be the thingness of the other. There is a problem here with the Tibetan translation from Sanskrit. Svabhava is translated as Rang Bazin, but Parabhava rather clumsily as Gazan Gai Dengo's Po. The term first appears in chapter 1, verse 3. A Tibetan reader would thus lose the etymological connection between own thing, svabhava, and other thing, parabhava, which then link up with thing, bhava, and no thing, abhava. Nagarjuna is playing on the word thing. 4. Apart from an essence and the thingness of the other, what things are there? If essences and thingness of others existed, things would be established. 5. If things were not established, non-things would not be established. When a thing becomes something else, people say that it is a non-thing. 6. Those who view essence, thingness of the other, things and non-things, do not see the suchness in the teaching of the awakened. 7. Through knowing things and non-things, the Buddha negated both existence and non-existence in his advice to Katyayana. 8. If things existed essentially, they would not come to non-existence. It is never the case that an essence could become something else. 9. If essences did not exist, what could become something else? Even if essences existed, what could become something else? 10. Existence is the grasping at permanence. Non-existence is the view of annihilation. Therefore, the wise do not dwell in existence or non-existence. 11. Since that which exists by its essence is not non-existent, is the view of permanence. That which arose before is now non-existent, leads to the view of annihilation. 16. Investigation of bondage and freedom. Life. 1. If it is said that impulses are samsara, if they were permanent, they would not move around. If impermanent, they would not move around. Sentient beings, too, are similar in this respect. 2. If it is said that persons move around, if they are non-existent when searched for in 5 aspects among the aggregates, sense fields, and elements, what would move around? 3. If one moves around in having clung to something and then clinging to something else, there would be no becoming. If there were no clinging and no becoming, who would move around? 4. It is in no way feasible that impulses go beyond misery, and it is in no way feasible that living beings go beyond misery. 5. Impulses that have the properties of being born and dying are not bound and will not be freed. In the same way as above, living beings, too, are not bound and will not be freed. 6. If clinging binds, the one who has clinging would not be bound, and there would be no bondage without clinging. In what situation would there be bondage? 7. If binding existed prior to one who is bound, that unbound person would depend on binding. That too cannot be. The rest has been explained by the gone, the not gone, and the going. 8. Those who are bound will not be free, and those who are not bound will not be free. If those who are bound become free, bondage and freedom would be simultaneous. 9. I, without clinging, am beyond misery. Nirvana is mine. Those who grasp in that way have great grasping and clinging. 10. When nirvana is not born and samsara not eliminated, then what is samsara, and what is considered as nirvana? 17. Investigation of actions and fruits. Acts. 1. Restraining oneself well and loving thoughts that benefit others are the dharma which is the seed of fruits here and elsewhere. 2. The great sage has taught all actions to be intention and what is intended. The specifics of those actions are well known to be of many kinds. 3. In this respect, action spoken of as intention is regarded as being that of mind. That spoken of as what is intended is regarded as being that of body and speech. 4. Whatever 1. Speech, and 2. Movements, and 3. Unconscious not letting go, 4. Other kinds of unconscious letting go are also regarded like that. 5. Goodness that arises from enjoyment, use, and in the same manner. 6. What is not goodness, and 7. Intention. These 7 dharmas are clearly regarded as action. This 7-fold division of acts is not traceable to any school of which I am aware. The simpler division into restraint and love found in verse 1 serves as similar purpose to verses 4 and 5, and has the added advantage of leading into verse 6 through its mention of fruits. 6. If the action remained until the time of ripening, it would become permanent. If it stopped, by having stopped, how could a fruit be born? 7. The continuum of sprouts and so on clearly emerges from seeds, and from that fruits. If there were no seeds, they too would not emerge. 8. Because continuums are from seeds, and fruits emerge from continuums, and seeds precede fruits, therefore there is no annihilation and no permanence. 9. The continuum of mind clearly emerges from mind, and from that fruits. If there were no mind, they too would not emerge. 10. Because continuums are from minds, and fruits emerge from continuums, and actions precede fruits, therefore there is no annihilation and no permanence. 11. The 10 paths of white action are the means of practicing Dharma. Here and elsewhere, the fruits of Dharma are the 5 kinds of sensual qualities. 12. If it were as that investigation, many great mistakes would occur. Therefore, that investigation is not valid here. 13. I will fully declare the investigation which is taught by the Buddhas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Shravakas, which is valid here. The explicit denunciation of verse 12 and the strident certainty of verse 13 are an uncharacteristically heavy-handed and wordy way of telling us that the right view is about to be given. Yet the text presents all voices with sympathy, suggesting a developmental account of ethics in Buddhism rather than a "we're right, you're wrong" version. 14. Just like a contract, irrevocable action is like a debt. In terms of realms, there are 4 types. Moreover, its nature is unspecified. Nature, Sanskrit Prakriti, Tibetan Rang Bazin. 15. It is not let go of by letting go, but only let go of by cultivation. Therefore, through irrevocability are the fruits of acts produced. 16. If it perished through being let go of by letting go and the transcendence of the action, then faults would follow, such as the perishing of actions. 17. The very irrevocability of all actions in similar or dissimilar realms, that one alone is born when crossing the boundary, i.e. reborn. 18. In the visible world there are 2 kinds, actions of all types, and that irrevocability of actions are produced as different things and remain so even on ripening. 19. When the fruit is transcendent, and when one dies, that ceases. One should know its divisions to be without corruption and with corruption. 20. Emptiness is not annihilation, and samsara is not permanent. The Dharma of the irrevocability of actions is taught by the Buddha. 21. Because actions are not born, in this way they have no nature. Therefore, because they are not born, therefore they are revocable. 22. If actions existed by nature, without doubt they would be permanent. Actions would not be done by an agent, because what is permanent cannot be done. 23. If actions were not done by anyone, one would fear meeting what one has not done. Also, the fault would follow for that person of not dwelling in the pure life. 24. All conventions also, without doubt, would be contradictory. Also, the distinction between doing good and evil would not be valid. 25. When the ripening of that action has ripened, it would ripen again and again, because if it existed by nature, it would always remain. 26. This action has the character of affliction, and afflictions are not real. If affliction is not real, how can action be real? 27. Actions and afflictions are taught to be the conditions for bodies. If actions and afflictions are empty, how can one speak of bodies? 28. People who are obscured by ignorance, those with craving, are the consumers of the fruits of action. They are not other than those who do the action, and they are also not those very ones. 29. Because the action does not emerge from conditions and does not emerge from non-conditions, therefore the agent too does not exist. 30. If neither the action nor the agent exists, where can there be a fruit of the action? If the fruit does not exist, where can the consumer exist? 31. Just as a teacher creates a creation by a wealth of magical powers, and just as if that creation too created, again another would be created. 32. Like this, whatever action too done by that agent is also like the aspect of a creation. It is just like, for example, a creation creating another creation. 33. Afflictions, actions, and bodies, and agents and fruits are like a city of Gandharvas, a mirage, a dream. 18. Investigation of self and things. Self. 1. If the aggregates were self, it would be possessed of arising and decaying. If it were other than the aggregates, it would not have the characteristics of the aggregates. 2. If the self did not exist, where could what is mine exist? In order to pacify self and what is mine, grasping I and grasping mine can exist no more. 3. The one who does not grasp at me and mine likewise does not exist. 4. When one ceases thinking of inner and outer things as self and mine, clinging will come to a stop. Through that ceasing, birth will cease. 5. Through the ceasing of action and affliction, there is freedom. Action and affliction come from thoughts, and they from fixations. Fixations are stopped by emptiness. 6. It is said that there is a self, but non-self too is taught. The Buddhas also teach that there is nothing which is neither self nor non-self. Tsongkhapa 325 cites the Kasyapa Parivriti as a source here. 7. That to which language refers is denied, because an object experienced by the mind is denied. The unborn and unceasing nature of reality is comparable to nirvana. Tsongkhapa 326 explains that CD are an answer to the question implied in 5 CD, i.e., how does emptiness stop fixations? 8. Everything is real, not real, both real and not real, neither not real nor real. This is the teaching of the Buddha. 9. Not known through others, peaceful, not fixed by fixations, without conceptual thought, without differentiation. These are the characteristics of suchness. 10. Whatever arises dependent on something else is at that time neither that very thing nor other than it. Hence it is neither severed nor permanent. 11. That ambrosial teaching of the Buddhas, those guardians of the world, is neither the same nor different, neither severed nor permanent. Buddha Palada Commentary, not the same, not different, not severed, not permanent. That is the ambrosial teaching of the Buddha, the guardian of the world. 12. When perfect Buddhas do not appear, and when their disciples have died out, The wisdom of the self-awakened ones will vividly arise without reliance. 19. Investigation of time. Time. 1. If the present and the future were contingent on the past, then the present and the future would have existed in the past. 2. If the present and future did not exist there, then how could the present and the future be contingent on it? 3. Without being contingent on the past, neither can be established. Hence, the present and the future times also do not exist. 4. These very stages can be applied to the other two: superior, inferior, middling, etc. Singularity and so on can also be understood thus. AB. This means that you could say the same about past and future in relation to the present, and present and past in relation to the future, as you can of present and future in relation to the past, as Nagarjuna has just done in verses 1 through 3. 5. Non-dwelling time cannot be apprehended, since time which can be apprehended does not exist as something which dwells. How can one talk of unapprehendable time? 6. If time depended on things, where would time, which is a non-thing, exist? If there were no things at all, where would a view of time exist? 20. Investigation of combination. Combination. 1. If a fruit is born from the combination of cause and conditions and exists in the combination, how can it be born from the combination itself? 2. If a fruit is born from the combination of cause and conditions and does not exist in the combination, how can it be born from the combination itself? 3. If the fruit exists in the combination of cause and conditions, it would be correct for it to be apprehendable in the combination, but it is not apprehendable in the combination. 4. If the fruit does not exist in the combination of cause and conditions, the causes and conditions would be comparable to non-causes and conditions. 5. If the cause stops once it has given the cause to the fruit, there would be a double nature of the cause, one that gives and one that stops. 6. If the cause stops without having given the cause to the fruit, those fruits which are born after the cause has stopped would be uncaused. 7. If the fruit were also born at the same time as the combination, it would follow that the producer and the produced would be simultaneous. 8. If the fruit were born prior to the combination, there would occur an uncaused fruit which has no cause and conditions. 9. If, when a cause stops, it is forever transferred to the fruit, then it would follow that the cause which was born before would be born again. 10. How can the production of fruit be produced by the stopping and disappearing of something? Also, how can fruit be produced by related causes which persist with it? 11. If cause and fruit are not related, what fruit can be produced? Causes do not produce fruits, they either see or don't see. 12. The simultaneous connection of a past fruit with a past, a future, and a present cause. 12. The simultaneous connection of a past fruit with a past, a future, and a present cause never exists. 13. The simultaneous connection of a present fruit with a future, a past, and a present cause never exists. 14. The simultaneous connection of a future fruit with a present, a future, and a past cause never exists. 15. When there is no connection, how can a cause produce fruit? Even when there is connection, how can a cause produce fruit? 16. If a cause is empty of fruit, how can it produce fruit? If a cause is not empty of fruit, how can it produce fruit? TS 353 appears to read stong in this context as simply absent. This verse in 17 through 18 indicate Nagarjuna's fluid, non-dogmatic use of the term empty. 17. Unempty fruit would not be produced. The unempty would not stop. That unempty is unstoppable and also unproducible. 18. How would empty fruit be produced? And how would the empty stop? It follows that that empty too is unstoppable and also unproducible. TS 354 gets round this by saying, how would fruit which is empty of inherent existence be intrinsically produced? And how would it stop by its own nature? This adds something that is not there in Nagarjuna in order to confirm to T's insistence, or Tsongkhapa's insistence, that stung pa always means rang bazin gais stung pa. 19. It is never possible that cause and fruit are identical. It is never possible that cause and fruit are other. 20. If cause and fruit were identical, produce and producer would be identical. If cause and fruit were other, cause and non-cause would be similar. 21. If fruit existed essentially, what would a cause produce? If fruit did not exist essentially, what would a cause produce? TS 354 through 355 has the same difficulty as in 16 through 18 with LCD. I don't know if that's a typo. He explains that a non-inherently existing fruit would not be produced by a cause in the sense that non-inherently existent things are also non-inherently existent. This is another example of Tsongkhapa's forcing Nagarjuna into his interpretative scheme. It also shows Tsongkhapa's as somewhat incurable. G266 also fudges this difficulty. From the ultimate standpoint, it does not arise. 22. If it were not productive, the cause itself would be impossible. If the cause itself were impossible, whose would the fruit be? 23. If whatever is a combination of causes and conditions does not produce itself by itself, how could it produce fruit? 24. Therefore, there is no fruit which has been made by combination or made by non-combination. If fruit does not exist, where can a combination of conditions exist? 21. Investigation of rising and passing. Disappearance. 1. Passing does not exist without or together with rising. Rising does not exist without or together with passing. The Sanskrit terms sambhava, vyungba, risings, and vibhava, jigpa, passings, are related to bhava, dignospo, thing, also see svabhava and parabhava. So appearance and disappearance would capture the play on the two words. Note also that in verses 15 through 16, the Tibetan byung, jig, does not translate sambhava or vibhava, but udaya or vyaya. 2. How can passing exist without rising? Is there death without birth? There is no passing without rising. 3. How could passing exist together with rising? Death does not exist at the same time as birth. 4. How could rising exist without passing? Things are never not impermanent. 5. How could rising exist together with passing? Birth does not exist at the same time as death. 6. How can those that are not established, either mutually together or not mutually together, be established? 7. The finished does not rise. The unfinished, too, does not rise. The finished does not pass. The unfinished, too, does not pass. 8. Rising and passing do not exist without the existence of things. Things do not exist without the existence of rising and passing. 9. Rising and passing are not possible for the empty. Rising and passing are not possible for the non-empty also. 10. Rising and passing cannot possibly be one. Rising and passing also cannot possibly be other. 11. If you think you can see rising and passing are seen by delusion. 12. Things are not created from things. Things are not created from nothing. Nothing is not created from nothing. Nothing is not created from things. 13. Things are not created from themselves, nor are they created from something else. They are not created from both themselves and something else. How are they created? 14. If you assert the existence of things, the views of eternalism and annihilationism will follow, because things are permanent and impermanent. 15. If you assert the existence of things, eternalism and annihilationism will not be, because the continuity of the rising and passing of cause, effect is becoming. 16. If the continuity of the rising and passing of cause, effect is becoming, because what has passed will not be created again, it will follow that the cause is annihilated. 17. If things exist essentially, it would be unreasonable for them to become nothing. At the time of nirvana, they would be annihilated, because the continuity of becoming is totally pacified. 18. If the end stops, it is unreasonable for there to be a beginning of becoming. When the end does not stop, it is unreasonable for there to be a beginning of becoming. 19. If the beginning is created while the end is stopping, the stopping would be one and the creating would be another. 20. If it is also unreasonable for stopping and creating to be together, aren't the aggregates that die also those that are created? 21. Likewise, if the continuity of becoming is not reasonable at any of the three times, how can there be a continuity of becoming which is non-existent in the three times? 22. Investigation of the Tathagata, Buddha nature. For TS or Sankappa's 370, this and the following chapter on error both serve to demonstrate that the flow of becoming is empty of inherent existence. 1. Not the aggregates, not other than the aggregates. The aggregates are not in him. He is not in them. The Tathagata does not possess the aggregates. What is the Tathagata? Here and below, the Sanskrit for Burten Pa is Upadaya or Upadana. Only from verse 5 does the Tibetan start using forms of Nier Len. 2. If the Buddha depends on the aggregates, he does not exist from an own nature. How can that which does not exist from an own nature exist from an other nature? 3. It is not tenable for something dependent on other nature to be self-existent. How can that which has no self-existence be Tathagata? 4. If self-nature does not exist, how can there be the existence of other nature? What is a Tathagata apart from own nature and other nature? 5. If there exists a Tathagata who is not depending on the aggregates, he exists in depending on them now and will henceforth depend. 6. If there does not exist a Tathagata who is not depending on the aggregates, how does he grasp or depend on them? Verses 5 and 6 mirror each other grammatically. LC of verse 6 is effectively redundant. It serves as metric padding for the conditional na. 7. Since there is nothing to be grasped or dependent on, there can be no grasping, depending. There is no Tathagata at all who is without grasping, depending. 8. If having examined in 5 ways, how can that Tathagata who does not exist as that one or the other be conventionally understood by grasping and depending? 9. That which is grasped or depended on does not exist from its own nature. It is impossible for that which does not exist from its own nature to exist from another nature. 10. In that way, what is grasped or depended on, and what grasps or depends, are empty in every aspect. How can an empty Tathagata be conventionally understood by what is empty? 11. Do not say empty or not empty, or both, or neither. These are mentioned for the sake of conventional understanding. 12. Where can the 4, such as permanence and impermanence, exist in this peaceful one? Where can the 4, such as end and no end of the world, exist in this peaceful one? 13. Those who hold the dense apprehension that Tathagata exists conceive the thought he does not exist in nirvana. T's 378 through 9 says that while this version is found in Chandrakirti's Prasanapada, he prefers the version quoted by Buddhapalada. Genghis Zin Stugbzung Girpa Deni Mia Nagan Daspala De Bezin Geshegspa Yog Keam or Seam. Med says Ranam Tagratag Par Bied. Those who hold dense apprehensions conceive thoughts of the Tathagata's existence or non-existence in nirvana. 14. For that one empty of own nature, it is entirely inappropriate to think that once the Buddha has nirvana'd, he either exists or does not exist. K 310, Zadpa Medpa, Tibetan, being the Sanskrit avyaya, non-variable, steadfast. 15. Those who make fixations about Buddha who is beyond fixations and without deterioration, all those who are damaged by fixations do not see the Tathagata. 16. Whatever is the own nature of the Tathagata, that is the own nature of this world. The Tathagata has no own nature. This world has no own nature. Investigation of error. Confusion. 1. It is said that desire, hatred, stupidity arise from conceptuality. They arise in dependence on the pleasant, the unpleasant, and confusion. They arise in dependence on confusion about the pleasant and unpleasant. K 312 reads, perversions regarding the pleasant and unpleasant, i.e. confusing pleasure and displeasure. For LC, Inada and Strang agree. Chandrakirti and Tsongkhapa differ. My translation follows Tsongkhapa's 383. The Tibetan could be read either way. The Sanskrit translation develops the meaning of conceptuality. Chandrakirti and Tsongkhapa quote the Riten Brel Gyai Mado. What is the cause of ignorance? Inappropriate attention. Stupidity arises from the corrupt attention. Yidla Biedpa Rinyadpa. 2. Whatever arises in dependence upon the pleasant, the unpleasant, and confusion, whatever arises in dependence on confusion about the pleasant and unpleasant, they have no own nature. Therefore, afflictions do not really exist, do not exist in themselves. Although the Tibetan supports this reading by adding dang before fayin si log, thereby making error the third item of the list, the Sanskrit repeats the exact wording of verse 1. Tsongkhapa's 384 notes the different commentarial glosses on these two verses. 3. The existence or non-existence of self is not established in any way. Without that, how can the existence or non-existence of afflictions be established? 4. These afflictions are someone's, but that someone is not established. Without someone, the afflictions are not anyone's. 5. Like the self apprehended in the view of one's own body, the afflictions do not exist in 5 ways in the afflicted. Like the self apprehended in the view of one's own body, the afflicted does not exist in 5 ways in the afflictions. 6. If confusion about the pleasant and unpleasant does not exist from its own nature, what afflictions can depend on confusion about the pleasant and unpleasant? 7. Color, shape, sound, taste, tactile sensation, smell, and dharmas. These 6 are conceived as the basis of desire, hatred, and stupidity. 8. Color, shape, sound, taste, tactile sensation, smell, and dharmas. These are like Gandharva cities and similar to mirages, dreams. 9. How can the pleasant and unpleasant occur in those things which are like phantoms and similar to reflections? K317 takes this to mean, how can pleasure or displeasure arise in people who are like illusions, etc.? This makes little sense in context, and the word people is not in the original. G hedges his bets and opts for ambiguity. Tsongkhapa's 387 explains this as a question about how the marks, or michan ma, of pleasure and displeasure can occur in the 6 sense objects. So, how can the features of likability and unlikability occur in the objects themselves? 10. Something is called pleasant in dependence on the unpleasant. Since that would not exist without relation to the pleasant, therefore the pleasant is not tenable. 11. Something is called unpleasant in dependence on the pleasant. Since that would not exist without relation to the unpleasant, therefore the unpleasant is not tenable. 12. If the pleasant does not exist, how can desire exist? If the unpleasant does not exist, how can hatred exist? Tsongkhapa's 389 says that the other 3 confusions, happiness, purity, and self, can be substituted for that about impermanence. He gives an alternative for CD from the other 2 great commentaries. 13. If such an apprehension as the impermanent is permanent, is confused, since impermanence does not exist in the empty, how can such an apprehension be confused? 14. If such an apprehension as the impermanent is permanent is confused, how would the apprehension there is impermanence in the empty also not be confused? 15. The means by which one apprehends the apprehension itself, the apprehender and the apprehended, all are completely pacified. Therefore there is no apprehending. 16. If there is neither confused nor right apprehension, who is confused and who is not confused? 17. Confusions do not occur for those who are already confused. Confusions do not occur for those who are not yet confused. 18. Confusions do not occur for those who are being confused. For whom do confusions occur? Examine this by yourself. 19. If confusions are not born, how can they exist? If confusions are not born, where can there be someone who has confusion? 20. Things are not born from themselves, not born from others. If they are also not from self and others, where can there be someone who has confusion? K points out that this verse is missing in Kumarajiva's translation. I guess is that Inaga, also says it's missing from the Tibetan version and is almost identical with 21:13, chapter 21, verse 13. It seems redundant here. 21. If self and purity and permanence and happiness were existent, self and purity and permanence and happiness would not be confusions. 22. If self and purity and permanence and happiness were non-existent, selflessness, impurity, impermanence, and anguish would not exist. 23. Thus, by stopping confusion, ignorance will stop. If ignorance is stopped, impulsive acts, etc. will stop. 24. If the afflictions of some existed by their own nature, how could they be let go of? Who can let go of what exists by nature? Sanskrit gives svabhavam for yod-pa in LD. 25. If the afflictions of some did not exist by their own nature, how could they be let go of? Who can let go of what does not exist? 24. Investigation of the ennobling truths. Awakening. 1. If all were empty, nothing could come about or perish. It would follow for you that the four ennobling truths could not exist. 2. Since the four ennobling truths would not exist, understanding, letting go, cultivating, and realizing would no longer be valid. 3. Since they would not exist, the four fruits would also not exist. If the fruits did not exist, there could be no abiding in the fruits. Experiencing them would also not exist. 4. If those 8 beings did not exist, the community would not exist. Since there would be no ennobling truths, the sublime Dharma could also not exist. 5. If the community and the Dharma did not exist, how could Buddha exist? When you talk of emptiness, the 3 jewels are maligned. 6. The existence of actions and fruits, what is not Dharma and what is Dharma, the conventions of the world, all these too are maligned. 7. An explanation for that, since you do not understand the need for emptiness, emptiness and the point of emptiness, therefore, in that way you malign. 8. The Dharma taught by Buddhas perfectly relies on 2 truths, the ambiguous truths of the world and the truths of the sublime meaning. 9. Those who do not understand the division into 2 truths cannot understand the profound reality of the Buddha's teaching. 10. Without relying on conventions, the sublime meaning cannot be taught. Without understanding the sublime meaning, one will not attain nirvana. 11. If their view of emptiness is wrong, those of little intelligence will be hurt, like handling a snake in the wrong way or casting a spell in the wrong way. 12. Therefore, knowing how difficult it is for the weak to understand the depths of this Dharma, the heart of the Munis strongly turned away from teaching the Dharma. 13. Since those erroneous consequences do not apply to emptiness, whatever rejections you make of emptiness do not apply to me. 14. Those for whom emptiness is possible, for them everything is possible. Those for whom emptiness is not possible, for them everything is not possible. 15. You are transferring your own mistakes onto me. This is like mounting a horse but forgetting about the horse itself. 16. If you view all things as existing from their own nature, then you would view all things as not having causes and conditions. 17. cause and effect itself, agents, tools, and acts, production and cessation, the effects too would be undetermined. 17. Cause and effect itself, agents, tools and acts, production and cessation, the effects too would be undermined. 18. Whatever is contingently related, that is explained as emptiness. That is contingently configured, it is the central path. 19. Because there are no things at all which are not contingently emergent, therefore there are no things at all which are not empty. 20. If all were not empty, nothing could come about or perish. It would follow for you that the four ennobling truths could not exist. 21. If things were not contingently emergent, how could anguish exist? Impermanent things are taught to be anguish. In their very own nature, they do not exist. 22. If it did exist from its own nature, why would it have an origin? Therefore, for those who undermine emptiness, it can have no origin. 23. If anguish existed by its own nature, there could be no cessation. Because its own nature would be totally present, cessation too would be undermined. 24. If the path existed by its own nature, cultivation would not be appropriate. If the path is to be cultivated, your own nature cannot exist. 25. When anguish, origins, and cessation cannot exist, what ceasing of anguish could one seek to attain by the path? 26. If non-understanding existed by its very own nature, how could one ever understand? Doesn't it abide by nature, or doesn't it abides by nature? 27. In the same way, your letting go, realizing, cultivating, and the four fruits too are as impossible as understanding. 28. How can any fruits which totally hold their own nature and by their own nature are unattained be attained? 29. If the fruits did not exist, there could be no abiding in the fruits. Experiencing them would also not exist. If those 8 beings did not exist, the community would not exist. 30. Since there would be no ennobling truths, the sublime Dharma could also not exist. If the community in the Dharma did not exist, how could Buddha exist? 31. It would also follow that your Buddha does not depend on awakening. It would also follow that your awakening does not depend on Buddha. 32. For you, someone who by his very nature is not Buddha, could not attain awakening however much he strove in the practice of awakening for the sake of awakening. 33. No one would ever do what is Dharma and what is not Dharma. What can that which is not empty do? Inherent nature is inactive. 34. Even without Dharma and not Dharma, you would have the fruits. You would not have the fruits which have arisen from the causes of Dharma and not Dharma. 35. If you have the fruits which have arisen from the causes of Dharma and not Dharma, why are the fruits which have arisen from the Dharma and not Dharma not empty? 36. Whoever undermines emptiness, which is contingent emergence, also undermines all the conventions of the world. 37. If one undermines emptiness, there would be no actions at all, and actions without an author and agents who do not act. 38. If there were inherent nature, all beings would be unborn and unceasing, would be fixed in place forever, separated from the variety of situations. 39. If things were not empty, there could be no attainment of what had not been attained. no ending of anguish, and no letting go of all actions and afflictions. 40. He who sees contingent emergence sees anguish and origins and cessation in the path itself. 25. Investigation of nirvana. Nirvana. 1. If everything were empty, there would be no arising and perishing. From the letting go of and ceasing of, what could one assert nirvana in? 2. If everything were not empty, there would be no arising and perishing. From the letting go of and ceasing of, what could one assert nirvana in? 3. No letting go, no attainment, no annihilation, no permanence, no cessation, no birth. That is spoken of as nirvana. 4. Nirvana is not a thing. Then it would follow that it would have the characteristics of aging and death. There does not exist anything that is without aging and death. 5. If nirvana were a thing, nirvana would be a conditioned phenomena. There does not exist anything anywhere that is not a conditioned phenomenon. 6. If nirvana were a thing, how would nirvana not be dependent? There does not exist anything at all that is not dependent. 7. If nirvana were not a thing, how could it possibly be nothing? The one for whom nirvana is not a thing, for him it is not nothing. 8. If nirvana were nothing, how could nirvana possibly be not dependent? There does not exist any nothing which is not dependent. 9. Whatever things come and go are dependent or caused. Not being dependent and not being caused is taught to be nirvana. 10. The teacher taught it to be the letting go of, arising and perishing. Therefore, it is correct that nirvana is not a thing or nothing. 11. If nirvana were both a thing and nothing, it would follow that it would be a thing and nothing. That is incorrect. 12. If nirvana were both a thing and nothing, nirvana would be not dependent because it would depend on those two. 13. How could nirvana be both a thing and nothing? Nirvana is unconditioned. Things and nothings are conditioned. 14. How could nirvana exist as both a thing and nothing? Those two do not exist as one. They are like light and dark. 15. The presentation of neither a thing nor nothing as nirvana will be established only if things and nothings are established. 16. If nirvana is neither a thing nor nothing, by who could neither a thing nor nothing be perceived? 17. After the Bhagavan has entered nirvana, one cannot perceive him, it, as existing, likewise as not existing, nor can one perceive him, it, as both or neither. 18. Even when the Bhagavan is alive, one cannot perceive him or it as existing, likewise as not existing, nor can one perceive him or it as both or neither. 19. Samsara does not have the slightest distinction from nirvana. Nirvana does not have the slightest distinction from samsara. 20. Whatever is the end of nirvana, that is the end of samsara. There is not even a very subtle slight distinction between the two. 21. Views about who passes beyond, ends, etc., and permanence, etc., are contingent upon nirvana and later ends and former ends. 22. In the emptiness of all things, what ends are there? What non-ends are there? What ends and non-ends are there? What of neither are there? 23. Is there this? Is there the other? Is there permanence? Is there impermanence? Is there both permanence and impermanence? Is there neither? 24. Totally pacifying all reference and totally pacifying fixations is peace. The Buddha nowhere taught any dharma to anyone. 26. Analysis of the 12 links of becoming. Contingency. 1. In order to become again, those obscured by ignorance are moved into destinies by actions which are impelled by the 3 kinds of formative impulses. 2. Consciousness conditioned by formative impulses enters into destinies. When consciousness has entered, name and form develop. 3. When name and form develop, the 6 senses emerge. Independence upon the 6 senses, impact actually occurs. 4. Just as it only arises independence on the eye, visual, form, and attention, so consciousness arises independence on name and form. Tsongkhapa has a rather tortured way of explaining this. He compares the arising of visual consciousness from the dominant object and immediate conditions, i.e. eye, visual form, and attention, with its arising from name, attention, and form, eye, and visual form. But since he equates nama with the latter 4 skandhas, he is forced to imply that vijnana arises from vijnana, i.e. A is the cause of A. No doubt, Tibetans would explain this away by arguing that A is the cause of A plus 1, etc. But this is not convincing in context. Tsongkhapa seems unaware that nowhere in the early canon does the Buddha include Vijnana and Nama. Nagarjuna, however, does seem to follow this early tradition here. 5. The gathering of the 3, eye and visual form and consciousness, that is impact. From impact, feeling totally arises. 6. Due to the condition of feeling, there is craving. One craves for what is felt. When one craves, one clings to the 4 aspects of clinging: sense objects, views, morals and rules, and views of self. 7. When there is clinging, the becoming of the clinger fully arises. When there is no clinging, one is freed. There is no more becoming. 8. Becoming is the 5 aggregates. From becoming, one is born. Aging, death, torment, lamentation, pain. 9. Mental unhappiness, anxiety. These vividly emerge from birth. Likewise, the entire mass of anguish emerges. 10. The root of life is formative impulses. Therefore, the wise do not form impulses. Therefore, the unwise are formers, but not the wise, since they see reality. Mi Makaz is Sanskrit Avidvan, the ignorant. 11. When ignorance stops, formative impulses too do not occur. The stopping of ignorance comes through practicing that with understanding. 12. By the stopping of the former, the latter will clearly not occur. The entire mass of anguish will likewise completely stop. 27. Investigation of views. Opinion. 1. Those views such as I occurred or did not occur in the past, the world is permanent, are dependent on the extreme of before. 2. Those views such as I will occur or not occur at another time in the future, the world has an end, are dependent on the extreme of later. 3. It is incorrect to say I occurred at a time in the past. Whatever occurred before, that is not this. 4. If you think that that became me, then that which is clung to would be something else. What is yourself apart from that which is clung to? 5. Were you to say that there exists no self apart from that which is clung to, if the very that which is clung to were the self, yourself would be non-existent. 6. The very that which is clung to is not the self. It arises and passes away. How can that which has been clung to be the one that clings? 7. It is not correct for the self to be other than that which is clung to. If it were other, with nothing to cling to, then something, i.e. the self, fit to be apprehended would not be apprehended. 8. In that way it is not other than that which is clung to, nor is it that which is clung to. The self is not that which is clung to, nor can it be ascertained as nothing. 9. It is incorrect to say, I did not occur at a time in the past. Whatever occurred before, this is not other than that. 10. If this were other, it would arise even without that. Likewise, that could remain and be born without dying in that former life. 11. Cut off and actions wasted, acts committed by others would be experienced by someone else. Such would be the consequences. 12. There is no occurrence from what has not occurred. In that case, faults would follow. The self would be something made, or even though it occurred, it would be uncaused. 13. Therefore, the self occurred, did not occur, both, or neither. All those views of the past are invalid. 14. I will occur at another time in the future. I will not occur. All those views are similar to those of the past. 15. If the divine were human, then there would be something permanent. The divine is utterly unborn because there is no birth in permanence. 16. If the human were other than the divine, then there would be no permanence. If the divine and the human were different, there could be no continuity between them. 17. If one part were divine and one part were human, there would be both permanence and no permanence, but that is not reasonable. 18. If both permanence and impermanence were established, you would have to assert non-permanence and non-impermanence as established. 19. If something came from somewhere and went somewhere, then samsara would be without beginning. That is not the case. 20. If there were nothing permanent at all, what thing could be impermanent, permanent, and impermanent, free of both? 21. If this world had an end, how would the next world come to be? If this world had no end, how would the next world come to be? 22. Because the continuity of the aggregates is similar to the light of a lamp, therefore the very existence or non-existence of an end is unreasonable. 23. If the former perished, and that future aggregate did not arise in dependence upon this aggregate, then this world would have an end. 24. If the former did not perish, and that future aggregate did not arise in dependence upon this aggregate, then this world would not have an end. 25. If one part had an end and one part did not have an end, the world would be with and without an end. That too is unreasonable. 26. How can one part of the one who clings perish while one part does not perish? Likewise, that is unreasonable. 27. How can one part of that which is clung to perish while one part does not perish? Likewise, that is unreasonable. 28. If both the presence and absence of an end were established, you would have to assert the non-presence and non-absence as established. 29. And because all things are empty, about what and in whom do views such as that of permanence spring forth? 30. I bow down to Gautama. whose kindness holds one close, who revealed the sublime Dharma in order to let go of all views. Tsongkhapa recognizes that this verse can be treated as separate from the body of the chapter. He also cites the Salu Ljang Pai Mado, or Salastamba Sutra, an early Mahayana sutra, as a source for this chapter.